regards of the Dower Act, I learned in fundamentals of real estate that it only applies if they are legally married. But I keep hearing people saying that even a common law is affected by the, the by this law. I'm just mixed up right now, and I just don't know what to believe. Is this something that is applied to common law relationships too?
So there are two different things, right? One is family law, and the other one is Dower Act, right? They're two different things. So division of assets, if you're common law versus Dower Act. We don't care about division of assets as it pertains to common law. So if two people live together for a year, I think it is, don't quote me on it, but I think it's year, they become a common law, right? But in this case, so let's say they separate and they purchase assets together. It could be car, it could be property, it could be anything. So there are rules around laws around how those assets are split up between the two parties. We don't care about that, right? It's not that we don't care about somebody's possessions. What we don't care about, because it doesn't apply to us. We don't have anything to do with that. We don't have to take any action in that. What we care about, where we will have to do something about, would be when somebody's married, then Dower Act will apply. And that's when we do care, because we have to do something. And if we don't do the right steps in that scenario, we would get in trouble. And hence, it's a selfish interest that we have. And not just that, it's just that's something that we would have to do something about, right? So we have to take steps. And that's what we need to remember. Dower Act only applies when somebody is married. So if they're legally married, not common law, legally married, then Dower Act will apply. So basically, Dower Act, just for everybody who's listening here, I'll just recap what Dower Act is, because I've brought it up a few times now. Dower Act is a very important concept. It doesn't matter which exam you are preparing or which course you're taking, actually. You need to understand Dower Act. So as a real estate professional, very important that you understand Dower Act. So Dower Act basically says that it protects the rights of untitled spouse in a matrimonial house. So that means if there's a couple, they're married, then the person who is not on the title. So for example, let's say our house is under my husband's name, right? So in this case, if he wanted to go sell that house, I would have to consent. I would have to sign off saying that it's okay for him to sell the house, right? So this has nothing to do with divorce or anything. It's just that when you go to list somebody's property, you have to ask them a question. It's part of our contract. Are you legally married? And if they say yes, then we check the title. If there's only one person on the title, then we have to get the consent signed from the other person, right? If let's say the wife's name is on the title, we will have to get the consent signed by the husband, but it only applies to legally married couples. It has to be a matrimonial home, not a rental property. So for example, my husband has few rental properties under his name. Those don't apply. He does not have to get my consent to sell those properties. He can sell them himself. But if it's a matrimonial home and only his name is on there, I would have to give consent, right? So the other spouse who is not on the title will have to get consent for the person to sell the property. So applies to married couples, applies to matrimonial home, does not apply to rental properties unless the couple has lived in that property even for one night, then they will apply to that rental property. So what I mean by that is, so let's say we were living in a house. Let's say it was under my husband's name, for example, right? So we're living in a house, it's under his name. Now we buy a new house and we move into that house. So when we go to sell the first house, because we have lived in the house, either spouse has lived in the house, it becomes a matrimonial home. And now to sell the property, Dower consent would be required. So I would have to give consent to sell that property as well. But let's say he bought a property under his name. Even if I made the down payment, even if I'm making the payments, it does not matter. It's under his name. It's a rental property. It does not, I have nothing to do with it in terms of signing anything when he goes to sell the property. He would do that himself. So it doesn't apply if both people are on the title. So let's say my husband and I are both on the title. Now, Dower Act doesn't apply because there's nobody's rights to protect. We would both have to sign the paperwork, right? And that's an important thing to keep in mind. If there's three people on the title, for example, all three people have to sign the service agreement. All three people have to sign the purchase contract. So you can't, let's say, husband, wife, father-in-law on the title. Father-in-law also has to sign the purchase contract and the service agreement. So you cannot have two people out of three sign it and sell the property.